Like to call the meeting to order, the March 28th, 2012 meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. Moving on to new business, a request for determination of applicability, Roger Hershon, RB Lowell LLC. Project location is 199 to 211 Plain Street, and the project or the applicant proposes to cut invasive species and vines along the River Meadow Brook. And can I have you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Roger Hershorn, a representative of RB Lowell.
Why don't you tell us what you're planning to do out there?
Okay, good evening. Meadowbrook Center, which is where Target is, we recently purchased the non-Target portion in December from Target, and we're in the process now of redeveloping the center and re-tenanting it and putting a new face on it. The application before you is to clear invasive plants species along the River Meadowbrook at the edge of the parking lot. I met with a representative from Bartlett Tree Service yesterday on site, who identified the invasives that are on site, I can list the invasives for you if you want. They're all on the City of Lowell invasive plant species list. Would you like me to list the invasives that he noted as being present is the black locust, common buckthorn, glossy buckthorn, Japanese honeysuckle, multiflora rose, Norway maple, oriental bittersweet, tree of heaven. What he proposes to do is cut the invasives low to the ground, either with loppers or chainsaw, and apply an herbicide that's approved for use in sensitive watershed areas. The two herbicides that he proposed to use are, one is called Sightline and another is called Aquamaster. Sightline is mixed with Impel, which is an oil, on an 80-20 mixture, and Aquamaster is a 50-50 mixture with water. And that's, in essence, what it is that we would like approval to do.
When are you planning to do this work?
We'd like to do it before the plants come into bloom, because we believe it'll be a lot easier to do when there are no leaves.
We typically, on an application like this, we get a more detailed plan. I noticed that we have pretty much the city overhead aerial photo with some handwritten plans in it. What percentage of, and I'm assuming this is along the edge of the parking area that comes up to and along River Meadow Brook, what percentage of herbaceous material are you removing from along the bank area?
I'm going to just give you an estimate because I don't know, because it's hard to tell because it's growing within non-invasive species, but I'm going to estimate about 50%. And with regard to the plan, I had a conversation with Craig Thomas prior to submitting the application, and he thought with I forget if he called it a minor application, what the technical name of the application was that he directed me or suggested that I use an aerial from the GIS from the city's website and just label, the area that would be affected. So that's why I don't have a reason I don't have a more detailed plan.
Are there going to be stump removal at all for some of the and root removal?
No, the process is that the stumps remain and they're treated with the herbicide with a paintbrush, and then the stumps would remain.
Okay, is there any thought as to reintroducing some native species along that area to keep some shade coverage along that side and stretch of the River Meadow Brook?
We had not contemplated that, no.
All right, no further questions. Commissioner Chalupka? Commissioner Varnum?
How close to the brook will your clearing go?
There's not a lot of room between the exit pavement and the brook. Again, I'm estimating within 5, 8, 10 feet.
And how wide a swath is this clearing? How wide would the cleared
Wide-
strip be?
When you say wide, you don't mean from the brook to the parking lot,
From
you
the
mean the length of
parking
the parking
lot
lot.
to the other side of the clearing?
The entire frontage of the property. The frontage
No,
along the Meadow
no.
Brook.
No,
If you want me to, I can come up and point to it if you'd like.
if you start at the parking lot and go perpendicular towards the brook, how wide would the clearing strip be?
I see. I mean, the whole area can't be more than, 25, 30 feet, I would estimate on average. So, call it plus or minus 15 to 20 feet.
And would the plans be for maintenance once the clearing is done? You're killing off the roots so they won't sprout, but then what? What will be left there?
When we're done with removing the invasives.
When you're done with the work,
What plants,
what will it look like?
well, when we cut the invasive species, we would take
They're
what we
gone,
cut away.
and now what?
And now the non-invasives are left, and I can't quantify for you what they are or how many they are. I mean, there's a couple weeping willows, I believe, and
So there's no plan.
there are trees left.
There's-
I can't tell you how many.
There's no plan for ongoing maintenance such as mowing or,
Well, it's not a grassed area. The answer is no. There's no plans for ongoing maintenance on that side, on the other side of the guardrail.
and no
I
plan,
mean, to the extent it's needed, of course we will, but I don't know that there's any.
and there's no plan for planting any new materials there.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Moore?
So, yeah, I think something that maybe this is where we're headed is, I'd be interested in getting an idea of what this is going to look like after the fact. I mean, will there be areas where it turns out that an entire stretch has been, all Norway maples and everything is removed? And just to get a better picture of where the removals are coming from, because you've got a pretty sizable distance you're working with there, and if you're going most of the way down to the stream bed, it could look pretty, it could really get emptied out in places, and I wonder if erosion could become a concern.
I mean, one thing I can tell you is if it's not an invasive species, we don't plan on removing it.
Right, but you can't control where the invasives are and whether or not they're clustered or what that distribution looks like.
That's correct.
And then also, will a single application of the herbicide be sufficient, or do you have to revisit and do a few rounds of applications?
I'm told it's one application.
It is one, okay.
Yeah.
That's all, thank you.
Okay.
I guess what I'm concerned with most here is, and it's been expressed, is what this area is going to look like after and how stable it will be. We don't have the particulars as to how extensive the invasives are now and how many natural species are there now to keep the site somewhat stable, and knowing going forward, I mean, you're just removing one stretch, but the invasives are going to come back, whether you like it or not. I mean, they're going to come back. It may be a planting or 2 planting seasons, but they're going to come back. And so if there's no ongoing plan or maintenance schedule to keep ahead of the reintroduction, then I don't want to tell you your business as to what to do, but it seems to me that it would make sense to have some sort of ongoing plan, to abate the reintroduction of, especially the black locust, the Norway maples, do we have multiflora rosa? Is that one of the ones?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff comes back fairly quickly.
I mean, to the extent they come back, we will and intend to keep up on it. When I said there's no plan for ongoing maintenance, is because I'm not a landscaper. I was told that when they're treated, they won't come back, and perhaps that's naive of me to accept that as gospel. But we're coming in with the application to clear it. We don't want them to come back, otherwise we wouldn't be here with the application in the first instance. So yes, if they come back, we would continue to monitor it and treat it as needed.
I guess, and my second concern is somewhat related. Even though they're invasives, they serve a purpose, and the purpose right now, what they're serving is they provide cover for wildlife that uses that stretch of the River Meadow Brook. And you may say, it's probably not a lot going on there, but there probably is quite a bit. I know it's a highly industrialized and commercialized area. Regardless, though, you have the Lowell connector there, but it's also a major throughway, at least as far as the River Meadow Brook goes, for whatever fauna that we have coming through that stretch of the city. We'll be using that cover, at night, during the day, whenever. You don't see it, and once we remove that, it removes that opportunity for wildlife to enjoy that sort of isolation, what little of it there is already. I suppose I would like to know, what the percentage is and how much cover is going to remain, and how much, and a twofold reason. One is to provide cover, shade, and whatnot, but two, to keep that area stable. It's a parking area. I don't know what sort of controls that you have there as far as keeping the parking area clean. Is that regularly swept?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Trash removal, large windblown stuff that would otherwise end up in the River Meadow.
And the parking lot is swept 4 times a week.
Oh, all right, okay. That's good to know. I mean, this is here on an RDA. I mean, normally, something like this is, we could -3 this, and I don't know, I don't know what the pleasure of the rest of the commissioners are now. I mean, I'm not, to me, I don't think we need to continue this. I don't know what the rest of the commission members' opinion is at this point in time. I mean, to me, I would be comfortable -3ing this now, but I would want at least for you to provide our office with through your, who is it, Burke, that's doing the?
Bartlett.
Who?
The landscaper?
Yeah.
A Bartlett tree?
All right, I would suppose I would like them to provide some sort of written information as to what the percentage of native species remain and will remain, and to the best of their ability, some sort of density as to, where they are along that stretch. I know you're probably, how long is that stretch? Probably 800 feet or so?
Yeah, I would say that's probably about right.
I mean, I was out there, I was trying to gauge, and it's a couple of football fields at least, so. I think your landscaper should be able to provide that information. So we get some sort of idea and stay in touch with the office and perhaps consider reintroducing some hardy native species that will provide some low coverage. It doesn't have to be extensive, but I don't know, Louisa, if you have any thoughts on that, but I'll shut up now.
In light of the discussion here, I agree that perhaps for purposes of wildlife and erosion that we don't know exactly how much brush and things will remain there. I'm wondering if your purpose is to just not have these species hanging over your parking lot edges, perhaps just a limit of width would satisfy your purposes and ours. For instance, maybe a 10-foot strip along the pavement, the whole length. And then if there were a good species that wasn't invasive, perhaps could be left, or perhaps the whole 10-foot strip could be cut and then treated with loam and seed or something if you wanted to. But where we don't know exactly the limits of your clearing and exactly the extent of the clearing, I'm a little hesitant to say, okay, go clear, because invasives aren't in every case noxious if they're working as erosion control or feed for wildlife or cover for wildlife. Without more detail, it's hard to say. Perhaps we could rule on this with conditions if you thought that every invasive didn't need to be removed out there. That's sort of the way I'm leaning as to an extent measurement-wise.
Would it make sense if, and because I don't know either, would it make sense to limit the clearing to a percentage and spread the percentage of what's remaining out until we had more information? In other words, I'm not saying, say it's 50% clearing. I'm not saying 50% remove all this and leave all this, but stagger the clearing. And if it turns out to be more than 50%, then come back before the board with a more detailed plan and show you, why it's more than 50% and why we feel it needs to be cleared.
I think once you get a crew out there, it's going to be pretty difficult to decide when you've reached 50%. They work pretty quickly once they get in there.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say the flip side to that, but the other concern with something like that too is when you get into a situation where you want to remove the invasives, you want to remove them all. Because if you leave some, it's going to just be a quicker avenue for them to reintroduce themselves, back. So it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to just, take some out or, spot some out. I guess my thing is, you take the invasives out and you just, you introduce some low-lying cover in there, too. It's, and just to, so there is some sort of coverage. Um, I guess I would be more, leaning towards that. The other thing too is introducing a native species also has the effect of preventing the invasives from taking a foothold back too. If it's a nice, good, hardy native species that establishes itself, it's going to resist and prevent a or set up a front for letting the invasives come back in too. So that there's that added bonus to that situation. I mean, given that, I don't know which way the board's leaning. I feel comfortable that this going forward, we can let Craig and or Aaron, keep an eye as far as, the amount goes. But I really would like to see something come back as far as a plan and the percentage, and if and I don't know, I don't know what percentages, but if it's more than half or 3/4 of the herbaceous material that's out there is going to be removed, then I think we need to think about reintroducing, some native cover back to what was removed. And it doesn't have to be, 1-for-1, but just to reintroduce some cover, for stabilization and for, and for wildlife habitat to enjoy, shade and privacy. I agree with Commissioner Varnum. We don't have a lot of information here, but I'll open it up to discussion for the board. Just, can we go forward today, or would you rather have a little bit more information before we do?
I just have a comment or a question about the herbicides. If we do go forward today, depending on what you guys think, I just looked at the 2 herbicides quickly, and I think that the Sightline appears to be more selective than the Aquamaster, so I just would be afraid that if you apply the Aquamaster, it would kill whatever you were to put in place of it. So if we do go forward, I'd prefer to see the Sightline herbicide than the other. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Anything else, Commissioner Moore? Is there anyone here who'd like to offer their comments? Okay. The chair notes that there's no one here. Aaron, are there any concerns from DPD other than your memo?
Not outside the memo. I think we were looking for a little bit more information as well, and Mr. Hirschhorn has pointed out that he had sent a little bit more detailed plan that apparently didn't make it through to our email server today. But a lot of the concerns that the commission has been raising with respect to the amount, the magnitude of removal, and then post-removal, particularly with respect to erosion, is a concern as well. But we're happy to work with the applicant if the commission's comfortable with moving forward this evening and making sure that if there's a certain amount of material removed, that there's some sort of plan in place to make sure that erosion's kept in control and that there's enough cover to a level that the commission is satisfied with.
Is that something you'd be willing to do, is to reintroduce some native species to provide stabilization and cover for what, and again, it doesn't have to be 1-for-1. We're not looking for that, just some.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with staff and, with a plan and see what it is that's being removed, and then work with staff to reintroduce native species and, an appropriate coverage.
Okay. Right. Commissioner Varnum?
Would it be possible to measure perhaps a strip from the edge of the brook back up the bank, a certain number of feet that you would not be disturbing?
It defeats some of, I guess there's a couple purposes. One is removal of invasives and and one is sightliness. And I think as to the sightliness, I think it defeats that purpose. And as to the invasives, as the chairman, I guess, stated, if you remove it here but not there, I think you said that it would have a tendency to come back faster if they're not, completely removed. So I'm not sure that would work.
So you'd be working right down to the shore of the brook?
To the extent that the invasives go to the shore, yes. And I think, not in all cases, but I think, I'm trying to visualize it now. I'm not sure if you can see it on the aerial, but they come pretty close to the brook now.
All right, how do we want to proceed in this? Do we want more information? I think we could -3 this with some conditions that the applicant provide at least two things. One, through his landscaper or the contractor doing the work, a percentage or some idea of the amount of herbaceous invasives being removed from the site, perhaps expressed as a percentage, and then to the extent that it's a majority of the coverage along a particular stretch, then to reintroduce some native shade. I mean, it's an opportunity to to beautify it too. You could provide some higher canopied shade and some lower bush type cover. So it's you have that opportunity now to do something like that. So that makes sense as far as removing stabilization, removing cover, and then reintroducing something that will thrive and is also non-invasive at the same time. So I feel comfortable, at least that we could proceed that way. If again it's not just up to me though. So.
I move to issue a -3 on this project, that as proposed, it won't harm the resource. However, should more than 50% of the material, the growing material, be removed, then a planting plan shall be submitted that will include trees, shrubs, and herbaceous material to replace the invasives that were removed. So the meaning is that areas where that are clear-cut due to the fact that everything is invasive, and in total more than 50% has been removed, that those areas should be subject to a replanting plan that will address all three levels of the growing area, both trees, shrubs, and lower down, and be so placed as to prevent further erosion and provide future habitat for any wildlife that may be in the area.
Do I have a second?
Second.
by Commissioner Moore. Any discussion on the motion? So we have a motion for a -3, and then to the extent that the invasives are beyond 50% removal, then the applicant to provide a planting plan for Conservation Commission approval to reintroduce adequate cover. And again, I don't think the commission's looking for one. I think they're just looking for adequate coverage that makes sense. But again, that's it. We have a second by Commissioner Moore. Any further discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Chaluka? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Moore? The ayes have it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask one
Yeah.
question for clarification? If it is more than 50% and there is a planting plan, is that something I work with on staff or come back to the board?
Yeah, no, you'd work with staff, and what the procedure that would happen at that time, you wouldn't necessarily have to come back before us. It would be brought before us for approval, but it's not, I mean, you could come if you wanted to, but it's generally would be either through Aaron or Craig, and then they would bring that to our attention.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck. Moving on. Now I'm going to call both of these because I have two of them, and it's a request for determination of applicability, and this was continued from back in September. The University of Massachusetts at Lowell. Project location is 300 Pawtucket Boulevard, or the UMass Lowell Boathouse, and it's installation of a prefabricated shed. There's a second item agenda request, and I'm assuming this is the new request for determination of applicability, University of Massachusetts Lowell. Project location is 300 Pawtucket Boulevard, also the UMass Lowell Boathouse, and that's the Belgar Boathouse, and it's to install a shed on the east side of the boathouse. I'm assuming this isn't a second shed, this is, you're replacing the prior filing with this filing? Is that correct? Okay, so is there a, since that was before, is it your request to withdraw that original filing? Oh, all right. I don't think we need to make a motion on that. We can just consider that withdrawn and proceed on the new one, or do we need to take formal action on that?
I don't know if you need to have your signatures to any kind of form for that matter, but it might be worth just taking a vote to formally execute or approve the withdrawal, if that makes sense.
All right, why don't we do that first, and then we can just proceed on this. So I have a motion then to I guess, accept the withdrawal of the earlier filing, and I wasn't part of that that hearing, as I recall. So that should make it easy. Do I have a motion then to accept the withdrawal of that earlier filing?
I'll make a motion to accept the withdrawal of the RDA filed on September 28th, 2011.
All right, and by Commissioner Chaluka, seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Moore. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. All right, so now we're just proceeding on the third item agenda, which is the new request for determination of applicability. And Jerry, turn on that microphone, and can I have you identify yourself for the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jerry Foley from Watermark. We're here tonight, thanks again for withdrawing that. That was going to be my first question. And the reason for that is that too much time has elapsed, and we discovered that on the initial filing that the owner was not notified, so it was necessary for us to do that as part of the RDA. So under the new filing, the owner of the property is the Division of Environmental Management, and there is a care agreement in place with the University of Massachusetts, whereby the University of Massachusetts Lowell takes care of this property. So they're the applicant, and the Division of Environmental Management is the owner. So they've been notified, and DEP has been notified as well. Aaron, I will tell you that I did not get the green slip back yet from DEP, but I gave you the white one.
Right here.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So the purpose of this shed project is to do a couple of things. Primarily, they've got a lot of very successful programs there at the boathouse. One of them, Lowell High School, and they've got a cooperative effort going back and forth between the university and Lowell High School. And they don't have any place currently where they can put a lot of the equipment for the boating, some sculls, small sculls, and oars primarily. Oars seem to be the biggest issue for storage. So they're looking for a place on site where they could store this thing. It's not a very big shed. You know, it's only 12 by 16. And the challenge here was that initially they came up with a foundation system which was going to be constructed of sonotubes. The problem is that the sonotubes were going to occupy some space in the floodplain zone. The floodplain zone varies slightly across the east side of the, it encompasses the whole site actually, but it ranges roughly, you know, between a half a foot and a foot in depth across the site. So the challenge was, if we occupy flood storage by putting in sonotubes, we had no place else on site to create flood storage because everything is below the floodplain. So we came up with another solution to the problem, and because it's such a light structure and such a small structure, we're proposing to use a flotation docking system. It's the same system that we'll be proposing in a little while for the National Park Service at a couple of sites in Lowell. You'll be getting a notice of intent for that in the future on another project. But we investigated this type of system, and it's very durable, it's very strong, and it works. And it's basically going to be 10 inches deep, in depth, and they're locked together. They're rectangular units that lock together. And the intent would be to assemble these things and just place them directly on the ground. Although portions of them are impervious, they do let water go through. And then from there, what we would do is we would put the shed on top. In the event of a flood, this thing, the whole system would rise up, and it will structurally support that shed even when it's full. It would actually support probably 2 or 3 times more of that weight. And as the flood subsides, it'll drop down. And obviously there'll probably be a need to do some leveling on there, so we're recommending that any shimming that be done between the flotation system and the shed, not on the ground. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to minimize any intrusion into the floodplain, and we're also trying to minimize the amount of excavation. These flotation systems actually come with an O-ring that you attach to them. So we're proposing to put in 6 O-rings that are part of that docking system that would go up and slide up and down galvanized poles. Subsequent to our first submittal, we did get some questions that we tried to address. And I believe we've done that on the plans, but I'll just go through them quickly. Initially, we showed hay bales for the erosion control, and there was a request to put in the straw wattle. We've replaced that, and we've included a straw wattle design, detail on the drawings, and we're showing them right here. And there's a question about what material is the ramp made of. The ramp is made of aluminum. It's actually integral to the docking system. It's the same type of you've probably seen it somewhere if you've been to a marina or something like that, but it's an aluminum ramp that has a skid-proof surface on it. And it can be disconnected quite easily with the removal of a couple of bolts. So the intent would be to have this thing resting on the ground at one end and then connected with a very quick disconnect capability at the door to the shed. So in the event of a flood, and anybody who's familiar with floods in Lowell know that you certainly get some warning time. We're not going to get a flash flood on the Merrimack River. The school would be responsible for going down there and making sure that thing's disconnected and stored inside the shed, and it would be off limits until the flood danger passes. We did provide information as to who that would be. That would be responsible for that, and that would be Richard Lemoyne, and he's with the emergency management folks at UMass Lowell. He's actually the applicant name on the RDA request. And there's a question as to whether or not the ramp is fully outside the 25-foot riverfront area. Well, as shown in the drawing, it does encroach slightly over. This blue line here is the 25-foot riverfront, and this little piece would encroach over. Again, though, it's not a permanent structure. It's only temporary. It's going to be removed. Number one. Number two, it occupies a space of less than 1% of the total riverfront area. So it really has negligible impact on the riverfront. The depths of the poles, we revised the detail to show that the poles will be 3 feet in the ground, set in cement, and they will be 4 feet above grade, giving the docking system the ability to float about approximately 3 feet if it had to. The 100-year flood is 0.8 of a foot above grade at that location. So the likelihood of it going up 3 feet would be more like a 500-year storm, I guess. I don't know the exact answer to that, but certainly there's a safeguard in there. And the purpose for these poles is to prevent it from sliding horizontally. So it'll be able to just go straight up and then straight down on those O-rings. And I think that was the majority of the questions. Oh yeah, there was one other comment here. The applicant system and shed will be adjacent to a highly utilized recreational area. The shed should be screened with an appropriate landscape design in order to reduce visual intrusion of the installation. Well, I guess we wanted to discuss that with you for a couple of reasons. We thought, we didn't know, what would be an appropriate screen because, this will be a shed that sticks up 10 feet above grade. Currently, there is a 6-foot chain link fence right next to where it will be. The fence right here. And the fence continues down this way, and we're going to put the shed right in the corner. And the concern, I guess, is the fact that, because this is a walkway recreational area for a lot of people, the shed might be unsightly or whatever. A couple of concerns with that. One is if we put any kind of permanent plantings in that area, we'll be occupying flood storage. So if you pick the species like an arborvitae or something like that, which can grow rather tall and ultimately screen out something fairly big, it's going to end up having a trunk on it that's probably a half a foot or greater over a period of time. So that's one concern. The other thing is it'll start growing roots, and the roots will probably undermine the pavement. Although there are a couple of trees here right now, this is going to fit quite nicely between two existing trees, one here and one down here, which is one of the reasons the size is what it is. The other concern is something that isn't quite obvious, probably from a conservation point of view, and that's security. Right now, they store boats, they store equipment. Sometimes I've seen, motors out there that were, temporarily waiting for storage. And sometimes that happens overnight, I guess. But I guess the point is, if the police or somebody go by now, they can see in there, and they can see all the way through to the river. And so they have good visibility. And there's a concern that if we screen that off, either let's say with a fence system, or maybe even those opaque slats that you've seen in some chain link fences, that it might be a security hazard. We were trying to get some sort of a comment from the University of Lowell, a couple of people whose job it is to investigate that type of thing, and we didn't get any comments yet, but I'm just bringing it up as a concern. So we wanted that to be a discussion point tonight in terms of, what you might have had in mind for screening. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward what the intent of this is. The galvanized poles, when they're put in, will have 1/4-inch holes at their base, just above grade. So any flood that comes in will actually fill up the galvanized poles, so that just even the diameter of those poles won't occupy any flood storage. So it'll go in, and then it will drain out afterwards. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on the design, Mr. Chairman.
So you're proposing 6 poles?
Mhm.
Is that, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And will there be any vehicle traffic around this shed area?
There should not be any vehicle traffic because it's in a grassed area. You can see the gray area is the pavement, and this will be in a grassed area.
All right, I mean, I suppose, I know there's a lot of, when they have regattas and stuff like that, there are vehicles that do park up in
Mhm.
that area and bring the sculls and boats and whatever they call them up there. I suppose what I'm more concerned with is a heavier vehicle, lawn tractor or something, hitting one of these things and bending it and sort of defeating the rings from, smoothly going up and down.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I hadn't really thought of that, and I could probably look into the detail associated with those rings. If I'm not mistaken, they're connected at the top of the 10-inch section, so I think they would be offset from the ground somewhat. But I think that would just be, a care and maintenance type thing, just like anything else.
Right. And this thing will float, the whole building fully loaded or whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. Commissioner Chaluka?
I'm not clear on where the posts are located. Can you just point to them?
Sure. There'll be 3 on either side. There'll be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
The 4 corners and the middle of the long axis.
What prevented you from just adding an addition to the boathouse?
They simply wanted to have a freestanding shed, and I'm not sure if it was discussed or, I mean, the instructions we got were they just wanted a shed to put stuff, and they didn't. I guess, there probably are a lot of reasons that I could think of, is that, once it becomes attached to the existing building, I think now you get kicked into the whole building code issues. It becomes part of another building. So it might have to, they're looking at minimal, there'll be like no mechanical in this whatsoever. There'll be electric line probably run out for a light bulb inside there when it gets dark, and that's probably about it.
It just seems strange to put the shed on the grassed area when there's all that concrete. I don't know.
Well, actually, we had it on the paved area at one point, and the university asked us to move it. And if you go over there and look at that particular portion of the site, you'll see that there are a couple of boat trailers parked in there, and there's a gate right here. And that whole paved area gets utilized pretty much for maneuvering.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody, they bring trailers in, they load up, and then they bring them out. So they do need some room in there to maneuver. And they thought where we had it actually, because what we tried to do is we tried to get it at the highest spot we could find on the site, and they said it wouldn't work for them there.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Varnum?
Well, this is certainly a new idea of how to do things. It appears to be, what you'd call a temporary structure, in that has no foundation. And if you enlarge the firm map that you submitted, it appears that the floodway goes almost up to the edge of Pawtucket Boulevard, which is an area that the FEMA people are trying to keep structures out of.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it would be a lot easier to approve, in my mind, something that was an extension to the permanent building, rather than a freestanding structure like this that, hasn't been proven as far as floodworthiness, and I And I don't mean, I'm not disputing that it may float, but I'm wondering how, what strength those poles would need to be in order to keep it from being pushed laterally and perhaps coming right off of the poles somehow, if they bend with the flood.
We could try to get an answer for you on that from the company that manufactures these.
The wetlands ordinance, in addition, has a 100-foot buffer here. And the Wetlands Protection Act, I know, has the 25-foot. I'm just not a fan of putting the temporary structures in that area. If it could be an extension of the building, I think that would be easier in my mind to think about.
Commissioner Moore?
I agree with some of Commissioner Barnum's concerns about the poles, and in particular whether or not the 6 poles would be sufficient to keep this in place, given the strength of what the current could be. I'm also, so it would be 4 feet above grade that the poles would extend?
Yeah, the top of the poles would be 4 feet above grade.
Okay. How high was the water during the Mother's Day floods down there?
I believe it wasn't considered the 100-year flood. I don't know what the elevation was specifically. I've seen pictures of it though, and my guess would be that it was at or close to a foot in certain locations.
Okay, but not more than nowhere
No,
near
I
approaching
seem
the
to,
4-foot mark.
yeah, as a matter of fact, when I was doing some research on this, the city engineer showed me some photographs, I believe, that showing the flood at its peak. And that lasted, I think he told me that lasted for a period of about 5 or 6 hours, and then it receded from that elevation.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't notice it in there. Did you mention what the diameter and thickness of the poles are?
They're, actually, I think they're 2.5 inches or 3.5 inches. They're your typical chain link fence type post that you would
Okay.
get.
Yeah, and given the total weight of what could be in the shed and the dock itself, that's where my concern comes in. And also, I know it's hard to predict what the load would be like. How much will that displace when fully loaded? How much draw would you imagine that the whole docking system?
The buoyancy thing?
Yeah.
That we haven't done a calculation on the buoyancy.
That's something that I would be interested in knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the life expectancy of the dock? Is it rated for 20 years? I mean, is this something that would have to be redone after a time period?
One of the issues we have here that we have to be careful about is because it's a public entity, they can't be proprietary in their selection. So what they need to do is they need to fulfill a performance specification
Right.
on this. So we're kind of sliding away from naming any product names. There are a few companies out there that make these types of
Right, I understand that. So you can't predict what the brand might be, but
right.
or is it better than a 5-year warranty or lifespan?
Yeah, I don't have the warranty information here, but I could certainly get that.
Okay. And then when would you anticipate doing this, and how long do you think it would take?
The whole construction process, I think what they would do is they would order they have to order the materials, and they would time it up so that I would guess that the whole thing could be done within a 2-week period, or probably less. I think the actual excavation part of the post will be, less than a day probably.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think a couple of good points were made, and just to look at the other side of this docking system, I know I had indicated potential damage to them from dry land activity, but we're really more concerned with the viability of this thing during a flood.
Mhm.
And I know we're not talking about the same sort of pressure and force, but the Pawtucket Dam has, what are those, 3-inch steel pins? 3 or 4-inch steel pins, and they bend over like rubber. And I know the pressures on those are much more significant. You know, they're 5-foot flashboards or 4-foot flashboards. I think they're 5-foot flashboards. And the water pressure can be tremendous, even at just a couple of feet. And I know we're not looking at that type of force here because this system floats, but a tree trunk or a tree floating down in the floodway, which this is, would take that out and not even, it wouldn't even stop. It would just keep on its merry way, and now we have more debris in the storm event. And I know you're probably not privy to the reason, but is there a real underlying reason why this, why an addition can't be built to the boathouse?
To be perfectly honest, it's a question that's never come up. It was simply, we want to put a shed out at this location, and we need to get permits in place to do that. And so I've never had a discussion with the school on the option of doing something other than a shed.
To me, that would answer a couple of questions. One is, you'd have this whole, you wouldn't be overly concerned with the storm damage. You'd have the additional flight capacity, but the Belgar Boathouse is already built to, with flow through, and it's not a structure that's going to that's not going to equalize inside the building. But I think you get the added benefit too, and you alluded to it a little bit here, and that's security. I think an outbuilding like this is more apt to be a target for vandals than the boathouse itself. Who knows? I don't know what the history is out there as far as that goes, but people see a shed like this, and I think they think lawn equipment and stuff that's small and can be carried away on the back of a pickup truck, and that's.
Well, just to make a couple of points to your points. Any addition on this side of the building, on the east side of the building, would probably require some sort of a foundation. So you'd be talking about some sort of a fixed point, not something that would float or, compensate for the flood. So that puts us back into the same predicament that we had earlier, was that if we occupy some space in the flood storage, we've got no place else on site to go compensate because everything's below the flood. So it's, what we'd have to do, if that was something that the commission would want to see, then the commission would also have to take a position that it's maybe the lesser of two evils, and you would think that the loss of compensatory flood storage would be, de minimis and not have that much of an impact on, a first order stream. So, I guess it puts us into a design quandary if we talk about putting an addition on the building, because it's going to need a foundation in order to meet the building code. Typically on a lot of these sites, you've got someplace else where you can go on your property that's above, or that's, where you can create compensatory flood storage. It's not an option here. The only place you could really even come close is out next to the sidewalk, but now you're talking about undermining, like out here. Even that's, you could make up some of it, but you couldn't make up all of it. There's a slight incline of about maybe 6 inches from the grade up to the back of the sidewalk at some locations there, but I don't think it's enough to compensate.
So, from what I understand then, adding something to the existing Belgar Boathouse is not something that's been explored yet with the university? It's not something they considered, not something they wanted to do?
It's not something they explored with me. They basically said they just want to build a shed out here. And they may have discussed it. If they did, I'm not aware of it, so I can't really respond to. I could certainly find out.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
would like that. I mean, it's, the building is in the floodway,
Mhm.
and we have in the past, at least as far as the volume of the walls themselves. I mean, I know the Belgar Boathouse, I'm assuming this is for storage, so it's probably not going to be insulated. It's probably just going to be open framed,
Right.
and I don't know what the codes are with respect to that, but I'm assuming it's probably just going to be 2x4 framed and just some sort of sheeting on the outside.
Right.
I'm not imagining that it's going to be heated or anything like that.
Nope.
So, I mean, we've rarely treated that as flood filling in the floodway, especially something that's right in the floodway of the Merrimack River itself. I mean, you're talking hundreds of cubic feet a second,
Right.
as opposed to a couple of maybe a cubic yard of fill. I don't know. It might not
Yeah,
even
if
be that much.
Right.
The other thing is, I know it would have to be on some sort of foundation, which is going to change the existing topography, but that's a fairly flat area already. I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be all that significant.
They'd probably go back to the sonotube idea again, just to minimize the amount of foundation that would be needed.
Yeah, I mean, if you could explore that option with them, I'm getting at least a sense from some of the board that would probably be at least an alternative that should be looked at.
Okay.
Do you have a time frame on their plans here? Or I know they're already
yeah.
into the spring cruise season, so.
It's like anything else, ASAP.
All right. Is that the sense I'm getting from the board? Yeah, all right. So at your request, then, a motion to continue by?
Move to continue to the next meeting.
Commissioner Moore, do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Chaluka. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Would that be 2 weeks?
Yeah, it should be 2 weeks.
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the second Wednesday of April.
All right, and if I get some answers back sooner than that, I'll certainly get them to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe that's the 12th, by the way.
11.
All right.
Yep,
Thank
thank you
you.
for your time.
Moving on. Next item of the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance. John Rosinski, Boot Mills Developer LLC, concerning a DEP file number 2060595. Project location is 130 John Street, which is the foot of John Street, and that's the Boot Mills West. Why don't we do there's a second related matter to this, but why don't we do the COC first, and then we can just proceed into the notice of intent, which was continued from a prior. I won't call that one yet. So this is just the work that was completed and not completed under the original notice of intent.
That's correct, Mr.
That's
Chairman. For the
that was back
record,
in 2005.
that's correct. Yeah. For the record, Richard Balmer, Nobis Engineering, 585 Middlesex Street. And as the chairman pointed out, we were here 2 weeks ago talking about the notice of intent for the completion of the redevelopment of the Boot Cotton Mill. One of the context elements there was an underground stormwater flood compensation facility that was approved under a prior order with DEP file number 2060595. And as we discussed with the board, it seemed to make sense to separate the compliance of that earlier structure with the current notice. So that's what we've done here. We filed a request for certificate of compliance for the completion of this detention or flood storage facility. And as we identified in our cover letter, we did identify a number of elements that were constructed a little bit differently in the field. It's just not terribly unusual in the environment that we were dealing with down there. And we've identified those 3 items in our cover letter with the request for the certificate of compliance. And it's our engineering judgment that the constructed facility functions at least, and we believe significantly beyond what was originally intended in the original order relative to total volume that is provided, as well as the additional water quality benefits that the runoff now reaching the facility is infiltrated into the groundwater, as opposed to being discharged directly to the river after temporary storage. And we ask that the commission affirmatively approve the certificate of compliance request.
All right, just give me a second. Is there any questions on the COC request from the commission? Commissioner Chalupka? Commissioner Varnum?
I'm assuming that should there be omissions of this earlier order, we can address with the new order. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, this is, the discussion, the thought had come up that to issue a partial COC, but for the work that was done, but there's a couple things. One is the original order is lapsed, and it's just sort of a housekeeping thing too. But two, and I think the more important issue with respect to that is there was work that actually was performed under the original COC, under the original notice of intent, and that work that was completed and has been certified by the engineer to be functioning as, at or above what was originally intended, and the reason for the partial would be to partially release that part, but the problem with the partial, though, is then it would leave some part of that order open, but that would be rendered moot by the new filing, which would supersede the old filing. So that since we're hearing them contemporaneous, then the thought is just issue a complete COC, and then just move on to the new thing. And the reason for this, obviously, the COC is because there was, at the time in 2005 that this was originally permitted, those underground chambers were allowed by the DEP, but no longer they're no longer allowing them, and so but that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean old projects have to dig them up. It just means that, for work going forward, they're no longer allowing them. So that was the reason for issuing the COC as opposed to just going forward with a superseding order. Commissioner Moore? All right. Do I have, if that's, do I have a motion to issue a complete certificate of compliance on the 595?
I move to issue a certificate of compliance on DEP number 206-0595.
Do I have a second? Motion by Commissioner Varnum, seconded by Commissioner Chalupka. Any discussion? All in favor, Commissioner Chalupka? Commissioner Varnum? Chair is yes. Commissioner Moore? Okay, so it's unanimous. The ayes have it. The COC will issue now.
Thank you.
Now, let me call the other. Let me back up now. Moving on is notice of intent. This was continued from the prior hearing, March 14th. John Rudzinski, Boot Mills Developer LLC, concerning DEP file number 2060689. The project location is 130 John Street, again, foot of John Street. It's phase 2 work of the Boot Cotton Mills and redevelopment and bordering land subject to flooding, or the floodplain and riverfront area. And again, this, as far as anything that was left undone or was not originally permitted by the 595 order, which has just been released, is now, this would supersede it anyway.
That's correct.
And again, if you could identify yourself for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Richard Balmer, Nobis Engineering, 585 Middlesex Street. And as the chair described, we were here 2 weeks ago with the initial presentation on this project, and there were a number of questions and items that were raised in the DPD comments as well as during the discussion of that hearing. The commission now has our response letter dated March 23rd addressing those items. We've revised the plans and provided the additional detailed information for the commission's records, and my discussions with staff as they felt that these items were complete. I'd be happy to walk through those point by point if you'd like, or you can just respond to questions, whatever is the chairman's wishes.
This is the same, you're talking about the same concerns that we covered in the last?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, we don't need to unless there's some new information on that, we don't need to
No, just provided, we provided the additional spot elevations, details, information.
Yeah, if you want to outline, if you want to go over the additional information, yes.
Okay. Working through item by item in the letter, 1 and 2 stand on their own merits. One was regarding the separation of the certificate of compliance for the prior case this evening and our order of conditions for this project moving forward. Number 2 was providing the copy of the letter from regarding the Endangered Species Act and that the project is exempt. Item 3 was the discussion about the sewer connection and providing additional detail, which is shown in the attachments, and it's also on the revised plans. Figures 1 and 2 in the 8.5 by 11 form that we provided were excerpts from the plans and show the revisions to the sewer in accordance with our discussions with the wastewater department. Item 5 was a discussion about the enclosed courtyard, and we've clarified on the plan that the precast curb element, or so to speak, is actually not a raised curb, it's just a border separating the concrete pavement and the ornamental pavers from the landscape planting areas, and is not creating a hindrance for the runoff that's reaching that courtyard to reach the catch basin that is being rebuilt there. Item 6 was a question about the existing trench drain at the end of foot of John Street. And there was an item that we provided a little bit additional research on. The commission asked whether we could come up with a way of maybe addressing or sort of retrofitting some level of water quality BMP into the runoff that reaches that facility. And what we found, is that the trench drain, let me back up a minute. A traditional trench drain is a box that is deeper at one end than the other, and then there's usually some level of a pipe outlet that then discharges into the rest of the drain system. This trench drain is different in that there's basically no floor. It's basically built right over top of the roof of the raceway that underlies the foot of John Street there, channeling the water from the canal system through the generator that's at the tail end of the mill there. And there's no additional vertical space between the top of that raceway structure, its roof, so to speak, and the surface grade to enable a retrofit of any kind that would create some level of a catch basin vertically that we could either retrofit that structure or put a new bottom in it and then channel the runoff into, let's say, an adjacent deep sump manhole or something like that. And the sort of the combination factor is that right around that existing trench drain, there's a sanitary sewer, there's a couple of gas lines, a couple of water lines, and those are highlighted on the attachment that we provided with the submittal. So we came to the conclusion there's just no additional way that makes sense from a feasibility standpoint to try and do anything different than what was done when the area was reconstructed, it's 15, almost 20 years ago now, during the initial renovation of the mill. Item 7. Was actually related item. I think there was a question about whether in the northeast corner of the site, the survey was showing, indicating that there was another catch basin at the sort of the entrance to the Riverwalk at that point in location. And what we realized is that there was a carryover from some old record drawings that indicated that there was a catch basin there that has since been removed, so that there is no additional catch basin at that location. Item 8 was with the discussion about the stormwater gallery. Item 9 asked for some additional detail on regrading in the courtyard and additional spot elevations at the entry courtyard. We've now done that as shown in Figure 5, and that's also incorporated into the drawings. Item 10 is confirming that our proposed grades here throughout the site, but particularly in the entry courtyard where the concern is with the flood storage, that we're not making any changes to the intent from the original submission that we've now issued the certificate of compliance for. Item 11 refers to erosion sedimentation controls, and we've modified both the plan And I guess the next three items, 11, 12, and 13, all relate to different elements of the construction pollution prevention plan. And we've made those modifications to remove the reference to hay bales and added notes to the plan, the construction plan, as well as the pollution prevention plan, that there will be no stockpiling of materials. There is also a discussion about how we were going to be cleaning the exterior of the structure, and we've clarified that there's no sandblasting intended. There's going to be a wash system applied, and we've provided additional information on the construction PPP that also provides the information on the collection system that will then collect the rinse water that comes off of the facade into a trough that is then collected and then takes the rinse water and disposes of it properly into the sanitary system for treatment. And then the last item asked for some additional information in the long-term pollution prevention plan relating to de-icing materials and landscape maintenance, and we've provided that additional language into the PPP.
All set?
That'll do it.
Are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Chalupka? Commissioner Varnum? Commissioner Moore? All right, I don't either. It was very comprehensive and very detailed, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm assuming we can proceed on this, but before we close the public hearing, is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns either for or against this project as proposed? And the chair notes that there's no one here in the hearing room other than the commission, our administrator, and the applicant, so I'll assume that there's no one here to offer any comments. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
By Commissioner Chalupka, seconded by Commissioner Moore. All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Do I have a motion regarding an order on this? No, we're trying to get a date. If you just bear with us on the plan.
I'd move to issue a Lowell standard order on this project. And this is related to plans that are dated, well,
Actually, if I may, Commissioner, you used today's date. I've got a set of plans that are full-size and incorporate the modifications that were made in the 8.5 by 11 exhibits. And that's all been sealed and stamped with today's date that I can leave here with Mr. Clausen.
Okay, so these would reference the plans dated March 28, 2012, submitted by the applicant on the night of the hearing.
Second? Were you done? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have any special conditions unless someone wants to add.
No, do I have a second to open it for discussion? Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's,
But seconded by Commissioner Chalupka. Now, for discussion, is there any discussion? It's just a motion for a Lowell standard order with no special conditions. All right. All in favor or opposed? Commissioner Chalupka?
aye.
Commissioner Barnum?
Aye.
Chair is yes. Commissioner Moore? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Two things, Aaron, under other business. Well, do you have anything? There's nothing on the agenda.
I don't have anything.
All right, I have just two small things. One, it will be a reoccurring issue, and I had mentioned this briefly. If we could get an opinion back from the law department pursuant to the requirements under the open meeting law as currently revised as to the extent to which the commission needs to retain items brought in by either members of the public or applicants to become part of the file. It's, certainly some items are simple. They can be, pictures and articles can be copied and whatnot, but for instance, if something was brought in, a part or whatnot that was brought in for a demonstration or some historical perspective, and does that need to become part of the file? I mean, can a picture be taken of it, for instance, and that be made part of the file or whatnot? I mean, you don't want to discourage public participation if the commission is going to take possession of family heirlooms or something like that. So, and if that's a gray area, I think it should at least be addressed, or some sort of clarification as to what needs to be done or how those issues should be handled. The second thing is a flip side to all of that, and again, I brought it up at the beginning of the hearing. There's some proposed legislation by a state representative, and I don't know from what town. It's not local, but I would request at least, as far as myself goes, through the city manager to oppose the discussions being made or being brought forward in front of the legislature with respect to changing the ability for public boards to be individually sued by individual members of the public. I mean, right now, as it stands, the Attorney General office is is the arbiter and the judicial body that brings forth enforcement action against public bodies, including the Conservation Commission. But we're all volunteers. We're not paid at all. We don't even get a stipend. And it's very difficult to get people to volunteer for these positions, and it is a public service. But were it to become, for instance, open season on individual members of the commission, by anyone, that it would be very difficult to get individuals, to get citizens to serve on these commissions. They could be financially ruinous, because, someone has a gripe or, whether real or perceived. I mean, errors are made, they're made all the time. I mean, it's, we're not a professional board, and, obviously we serve and strive to maintain, the decorum, at least in the meetings, but also, outside as far as the open meeting law. And we're very diligent about maintaining that, but mistakes happen. And they're certainly not intentional, but mistakes do happen, and generally they can be remedied very simply by repeating, what may have happened outside and whatnot. But I know, this board is very particular, and Craig and you keep us on the straight and narrow as far as email communications and whatnot. So, I know the reply all is never used and very rarely used, and so, so I know that the out of hearing communications, in my years of being on the board has been essentially non-existent, which is the spirit of the open meeting law, and as it should be. I think people who've at least been tuning into us know that I'm very particular about one, public participation, and two, people having an opportunity to be heard in front of this board, and for things to go on outside, of this public forum. I take very great lengths and strive to make sure that it can be, brought forward here. But in the same token, knowing that, mistakes can happen, and even if a mistake wasn't happen, but, to be vilified on an individual basis because someone perceives that an error was made. I mean, anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason.
So I wasn't aware of this issue until
it was in the paper. It was, and again, I wish I had written down. It was in the paper, I think, last Sunday.
Okay. Is it a piece of proposed legislation that's being considered right now?
My understanding was yes.
Okay.
That it was going to be brought forward. When I get into my office tomorrow, I'll do a quick search on the Lowell Sun, because it was in the Lowell Sun.
All right, I'll look for it too.
We'll
sure definitely look into it.
It can be found relatively easily, and I'll forward that along to you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look into that, and we can work with the manager's office to put forth the appropriate statement and state the concerns.
And
because
I'm
that's a
sure.
very big
I'm sure
concern.
the city's already on top of it, but I'm just voicing my concerns.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Any discussion? Seconded by
Second.
Commissioner Moore. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Good night.